What does it take to be an elite Olympic weightlifter? How can you make the transition from high school weightlifting to USA weightlifting? And what can you do now to have your best high school weightlifting season yet? Episode 19 of the Last Set Best Set podcast is a special episode because today I interviewed 3 of the best coaches in the state of Florida about one topic, high school weightlifting. First, I talked to senior international coach and president of Florida Weightlifting, Danny Camargo, about what it takes to go from high school weightlifter to making Team USA. Then I dive deep with Aaron Paley, the owner of Full Send Ollie and coach of the North Bay Haven girls weightlifting team, who I think might be one of the most advanced coaches in the state about the methods he's using and the data he's tracking to build some of the best youth weightlifters in Florida. And finally, I speak with the Fleming Island girls weightlifting coach Sean Coltis about how they were able to win these state championships in Olympic when just 4 years ago they didn't win a single competition. Let's dive in. All right, guys, I am joined today by Daniel Camargo, the president of the Florida Weightlifting Federation, owner of Ollie Concepts, one of the biggest teams in the state of Florida, senior international coach, and also, a lot of people may not know this, but 3-time junior world team member, and perhaps one of the most experienced coaches in the country. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, and I appreciate that intro. That's longer than I thought you were going to say. I thought you should say, hey, Danny, what's up? Let's go.
I've got 2 questions for you, and because the topic today is about high school weightlifting in the state of Florida, I feel like we've got 2 things that we could really cover here. So I'm sure you've probably experienced this as well, but I frequently have athletes coming to me asking what they need to do to make a world team. I have athletes very confidently saying that they are going to make a world team or going to go to the Olympics, and then they just kind of fall off after a month or so. I'm not sure if that's
because the reality sits in, man. The reality sits in. That's why.
Reality really does sit in. So kind of with your extensive experience coaching at the international level, what are 2 things that you think you see that separate the people who are competing at youth or junior nationals and doing well from the people who end up actually making a team?
I might have more than 2. Can I?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you know, in those early stages when athletes are at the national level, they're competing, they're participating, their goal is to podium eventually, but they're not there yet, versus the people who are there and making Team USA, whether it's a youth, junior, or senior team. Things that seem different to me is, number one, believe it or not, talent alone could get you on a U.S. team. That's not the only factor, but you know, someone talented can get there and ride that talent. Beyond that, though, there's more, and we'll probably get there. I think the difference is also staying generalized a little bit longer. It's so easy for these national level competitors to feel I have to just do weightlifting, all lifting, nothing but lifting 12 months out of the year. I believe most of the kids that make the transition from whether it's high school weightlifting or just the national level and finally get to those U.S. teams, they are still generalizing. They're not hyper specialized just yet. They're involved in other things as well. And that minimizes or at least prolongs the risk of burnout. And that's been a huge thing that I've seen. I also think that the national level turning into Team USA are still having fun, and I think you can maintain that feeling of just still doing this for the love of the sport, because the better they get later on in this conversation, the bigger their Instagram, the higher their lifts, the more accolades, the more wins, the more teams. Well, now you're getting put on ranking, and there's responsibilities with that, and the fun isn't so much fun anymore. It's like a job. And I think an athlete needs to be prepared for that day when that day comes. I mean, some of the athletes that we see on the podiums of the biggest world stages, they love the sport, but they're not always having fun at that level, right? In the context of what I'm saying. And so I think one of the things I see that changes or that improves or maintains between national level and Team USA is they still have that element of they're having a good time, learning and developing and not losing that fun. And I think the last thing between these 2 specific comparisons between national and Team USA is they are actively working on their performance anxiety, right? We all get nervous on stage, everybody. But the problem is training only gets you better at training. In order to be good at competing, you have to compete. So for the national level lifters listening to this right now, I'm not saying you have to max out at every stinking tournament,
Mm-hmm.
but I am saying expose yourself to the nature and process of tournament. The athletes who make Team USA for the first few times, it ain't their first meet. On rare occasions, you may have a stellar superstar that comes out of nowhere, a CrossFitter, a football player, a gymnast, and within 2 years, they're on a US team.
Mm-hmm.
Good for those people. Right? I'm talking about everyone else who goes to the quote normal, expected route. They've had so many weigh-ins, stress, warm-up, first, second, third attempts, good meets, bad meets, judges' calls, the crowd, the environment, the live streams, the photographers, weight cuts. They've been through so many moments and exposing themselves to the unique environment of competition that they're not as nervous. They're excited, but they're not nervous. And you know what I'm talking about when you have a perfect cycle, you PR the entire time, you're ready to go, you can't wait, you show up to the tournament and bomb out.
Mm-hmm.
That is not physical. That is mental. And that means, I don't know, every case is different, but in my experience, those athletes are showing up to the big stage, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
and they are paying attention to too many different things.
Yeah.
They're putting way too much emphasis on things that come naturally to them anyway. And so I think that differentiates the national level competitor and Team USA. They are not 100% yet, but they've conquered a lot of that performance anxiety.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that that is one of the biggest benefits of high school weightlifting. We're talking FHSA weightlifting going into USA weightlifting is the people who do high school weightlifting are doing a competition every single week.
Every week.
Every week. And so, if you think about it, I would say the average like upper level national competitor thinks or tends to only compete maybe 3-4 times a year.
That's not enough. Yep.
And in high school, you're required to do at least 6 competitions before you can even qualify for districts.
Yes.
So, if you're doing even the minimum, you're doing 6, 9, you're doing some competitors are doing the same amount of competitions in a year that higher level lifters are doing in 3 years.
Yes. And if I can add to that, I'll tell you this. What makes it Olympic lifting even harder is that you do a full 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 16-week cycle.
Mm-hmm.
You and your coach are working diligently, good days, bad days, but overall, you're ready to go. You feel good. You show up to that the one competition you and I are just talking about, and you don't bum out, but you don't have a great day.
Right.
All right. It's not exactly what you want, and athletes are never satisfied. I get it. But you come home, and it's months before you get to try again.
Right.
High school, you have a bad Wednesday, you have a bad Thursday, it's already on your mind before the weekend comes around. Next week is your next chance to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, you get just the feedback loop is so much faster, and you can make improvements so much better. Maybe it's just tweaking your openers. Maybe it's tweaking the timing for your warm-ups. Maybe it's just getting used to, having a judge looking right at you as you're about to lift. And I think that's a huge benefit for high school lifters in Florida for sure. So with that first part of the question, the second part of the question is I want to ask, what do you think separates the people who are making 1 or 2 junior teams? Because I think that that's a lot of our listener base, to those who could actually go all the way to the Olympics.
To the highest level.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, here is my experience as an athlete. And you introduced me as being a multi-junior world team member. I competed in other international competitions, and as an athlete in the 90s, man, I'm old. I was surrounded by the national team. I I was training at the Olympic Training Center, which was the thing back then. All athletes at clubs around the country, the goal was, coaches' goals also were to get their athletes elite enough to move away and train full time at the Olympic Center. That was the culture of the sport. Now club athletes stay put. And it's nice to go away, but you don't have to go away to be a champion. You can do it with your coach here at home. But back then it was different. And so every athlete and coach had that desire. I was lucky enough to be at that Olympic Center. And the reason I bring that to preface the answer to my question, or your question rather, is because I don't necessarily miss the constant training, the double sessions, the feeling absolutely beat up all the time and in this constant state of inflammation. I survived 4 years as a clean athlete, by the way, right? We got drug tested just as often, out of competition, in the dorm rooms or during practice, at least once per month. And I don't miss the stress of it all, but what I do miss is this: being surrounded by a bunch of other guys who swore they were just as good as anybody else in the country. And that came with problems and drama, but it also got the best out of ourselves to be surrounded in an environment where everyone else really thinks they're the next thing, has a certain aspect to it. And some of those guys were Olympians. And I always took note at how they walked, talked, behaved. Now as a coach, I'm a senior international coach. I've been exposed to Olympians. I have been on teams where there are Olympians. And I have helped produce future Olympians and been in that elite environment long enough. And here's the difference between a kid who's done 1 or 2 teams, I think, and those who have actually been at the highest, even world teams, right? Just behind the Olympics. One, talent will no longer get you further. You have to do that work now. So you can't skate by like you might from making a team or two at the Olympics or at the world level, senior world level. Talent has its limits at that point. You have to do the work, and that work is individualized. What works for you won't work for everybody. The other thing is I see they become way more specialized. They are no longer generalized. You can't really play other sports and dedicate and it complement your weightlifting. You will now see those destined for the Olympics be hyper specialized to specifically the sport. The other 2 main things that are really, really big that I want to mention is their mindset changes. Whereas these national levels and these 1 or 2 junior team kids you're describing, and they convert into that high level, elite level, Olympic level, their mindset changes from caring about absolutely everything to now allocating, only caring about what's important. They know how to let go. They're able to cope with a loss way better. A kid who makes his first junior national team, junior world team, may have a bad day and they're drowning in it for 2 or 3 weeks, man. A senior level lifter who's been there, done that, the Olympians, they'll have a bad day, bad meet, and they have like short-term memory. They get over it. A good athlete will get over it quickly. So their coping skills are way better than someone who's just chasing it. And resolving conflict, whether that's conflict resolution with themselves, with their coach, with their programming, with their environment, with their household, with their boss, with their, you name it. When things interrupt their training, they're really good about productively manipulating the outside weightlifting so that they can focus on weightlifting without distractions. I really think that's a huge thing. Mindset, I think, separates champions from those who will never get there. And in that same token, they understand when it comes to training, less is more. The time to overtrain and never take rest days, which you should, are when you are newer. You don't have to be young, but newer, intermediate. Once you're beyond 1 or 2 teams at the junior level, or you're looking at senior level, high level, or your question is Olympics, They know when to take the foot off the gas, and they actually train less than you think they would have otherwise. They do not train more.
Hmm. I
That's the
love that.
difference.
That's incredible. If you had to give one or two tips for people to work on their mindset, what would you say is something that is easily actionable that people can start working on right now to help them maybe get more regulated or less emotional about their training?
Yeah, okay. One is patience. We've lost that in our world. When I sound old, back in my day, when you started weightlifting or started coaching weightlifting, it was automatically understood it's going to take a while to get good.
Hmm.
And no one cared. Everyone took their time to get good. Uh, Today, it is a shame, but what I am seeing are athletes, and I'm seeing new coaches feel like they're not there yet and they want it tomorrow.
Hmm.
And they are misperceiving a struggle for a failure. So, my very first bit of advice on this is be patient and recognize, learn, athlete, what's a big deal and what is not a big deal. Can immediately help you cope and let go what you need to let go. And my next one is more for the perfectionists out there.
Hmm.
I am not a perfectionist at all in anything I do in my life. I believe in ranges. I'm not an absolute. Whether that is my programming, my personal life, my own exercise and fitness, my coaching, or when I was the athlete. Man, let me tell you, when I was an athlete, every day in training, especially the heavy days, all I wanted to do was survive. That was my standard. I can't quite relate to a person who feels everything has to be perfect,
Hmm.
the environment must be in order, the music has got to be right, or the worst one, they have to feel good in order to succeed in training.
Hmm.
If I am speaking to you right now, learn to be okay with less than perfect. It does not mean there's a problem. It actually gives you more options, because nothing is worse than a coach watching an athlete hit a PR, the crowd go nuts, the teammates are clapping, and they're still pissed off about it.
Hmm.
And when you ask them, why are you upset? You just made a PR. Oh, well, it just didn't feel right. I walked forward or I twisted a little bit. My arms was shaky, even though that would have been a good lift in the meet. That, I don't think, is a champion mentality. Um, I, I appreciate the perfectionists out there, and I train a few of them, believe it
Hmm.
or not. And I've learned to communicate with those people. But I communicate with them to allow them some grace.
Hmm.
Because those people who feel everything's got to be perfect will never get it, because it's a ghost. Perfection does not exist. And those would be the biggest two pieces of advice that I would give any kid right now trying to be a champion. Learn when to let go, because you're going to drive yourself nuts. And I just admitted I'm not the perfectionist type, but weightlifting seems to bring out our perfectionist side of us.
Hmm.
Even though it's small in me, it's brought it out once in a while. But dude, all you need is two white lights. Move on to the next one.
That's it. And perfectionism is a tricky thing in weightlifting because perfectionism really helps you as a beginner
Oh yeah.
because it allows you to see quick improvements because you're really focused on your technique. And as a beginner, the technique is the biggest thing that will make a huge difference. I mean, little improvements in your technique will make you lift a lot more weight almost immediately. But then that perfectionism stops working past a certain point
Yes, sir.
because you expect everything to be great.
Yes.
And that I think is probably one of the bigger things that leads to people burning out about weightlifting.
Yes, yes, and then they're coming to you saying weightlifting is a problem. This doesn't feel right. That doesn't feel right. And really, all along, they don't have to change coaches. They don't have to
Hmm.
change programs. They don't have to change online whatever they're doing. They don't have to change the gym, their training partners. They have to change their opinion.
Hmm.
And it's easy to say, but at least it's one thing to focus on. Perfectionists always feel like they have to work on something, and they feel like everything they do could be better.
Mm-hmm.
But just recently, perfect example. I have a super talented young athlete in my gym right now that I expect to go far. And as she's training, music in the gym gets a little louder, which we never had back in my day, by the way. More bodies were dropping barbells, more chatter was occurring, and she was becoming overstimulated.
Mm-hmm.
And I recognized it. We had a moment. We talked about it. We found ways to distract. She got through it. Successful training. After sitting down, I say to her, "So I really want to talk about what just happened there." And she goes, "Yeah, Danny, I'm listening to these two people over here talk about this, and someone walks in front of my path when I was lifting, and the music was, I didn't like the music, perhaps. I was getting hot. The bay doors were open." I forgot every detail, but you're with me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I say to her, "So basically you're telling me you could not control your environment?"
Mm-hmm.
She says, "Yeah, pretty much." And I said, "What will you do when you can't control it in a tournament?"
Mm-hmm.
And so we're working on that now, because you can only control your lifts. And when you don't like something, you can try to change it. And maybe you do. But if you can't change it, you have to change your perception of it to get through. I'll end by saying the most talented athletes to me are the ones who are mentally agile. And whether it's training or in competition, if it's not there that day, it's not there that day, and they're fine with it. They know how to adapt and deal with it. You're on stage and the platform's broken. Can you adjust? The barbells have a harder grip and knurling to it than you're used to. Can you deal with it?
A perfect example of this was
Yeah.
at the Olympics this year.
Oh, give it to me.
Hampton Morris's session. I'm not sure if you remember, but there was chalk on the platform, or something was happening where people were slipping in the same spot.
Mm-hmm.
And Hampton is about to go for his world record attempt. And he notices this, but nobody's cleaning it off. Like, they're not moving people onto the platform to sweep it or whatever it is. And so rather than, get frustrated or get mad about it, they just moved their bar to the left of the platform.
And did it.
And did it.
Love it.
And went for the lift,
Love it.
It is such a perfect example of that. I that was probably one of the coolest things that I remember seeing, is just how cool can somebody stay in competition
Yes.
when it's still going against them.
Yes, and I go back to something I said a few minutes ago. You can't do that and adapt and overcome unless you've been exposed to the experience of competition enough to feel comfortable. We all want to get consistent in reps and training, but that's the comfort of your own home.
Mm-hmm.
Can you get routine and consistent on stage? And that is champion stuff right there. That goes back to mindset. How many developing athletes would freak out? Freak out because it wasn't as orderly as they're used to doing it. So exposing these athletes to the uncomfortable scenarios and seeing how they perform. They may surprise themselves.
Yeah, of course. All right, so I've got one more question for you.
Yep.
So as the president of Florida Weightlifting, how has the sport changed here since you started coaching, and what are you most excited about right now?
Oh, gosh, there's so much I could say. I'll try to be quick. It has changed by it's gotten bigger, both in the athlete pool and the coaching pool. It's changed by being more recognizable. Hey, Danny, what do you do for a living? And when I say weightlifting, people no longer say, "Great, how much do you bench?" Yeah, I went my entire lifetime with that question. Now, people may say, "Oh, the clean and jerk or the snatch." So it's more recognizable. Because there's more athletes, because there's more coaches, that means there's more gyms, there's more spectators, there's more support, there's more money in it than ever before. I'm proud to say here in Florida, the money we make, we give back by paying for records, which was not a thing we used to do. We have a Florida Elite program where we stipend athletes. That was never a thing before, but we have the money to do it now. We also have other money that we invest, like funding international athletes who have to pay out of pocket. That was never a thing before. So these are the changes that has happened, right? There's also like greater expectations from the coach and athlete, professionalized. It used to be such a substandard sport. The only people in it were people who were hobbying it. Even
Hmm.
champions were doing it as a hobby. But now you could actually make it a profession. I am. I never thought I would, but I am. And there are far more opportunities like competitions. There's now an average from year to year, 20 to 25 local meets in Florida. You can find them anywhere. Uh, Back in my day, there were 5, and all 5 communicated, and all 5 agreed on what month to have it. And that was it.
Hmm.
So that is how it's changed. What am I most excited about it? Um, I think the thing that I'm most excited is that on the track that it's going now, I believe that the sport will have more opportunities beyond being an athlete and being a coach. That might be administrative, that might be governance, that might be broadcasting. How cool would that be? Uh, I think, like many other sports, when someone is no longer the athlete or no longer the coach, there could be things to keep them involved in the sport
Hmm.
without choosing only those 2 things.
Hmm.
That wasn't the case as I came up. It was either you're a coach or an athlete and your life was over.
Hmm.
So the idea of having, let's just call it, I don't want to say jobs on the side, but professions within weightlifting that can make a living because of the popularity, I'm all about it. Dude, I see weightlifting on commercials now.
Yeah.
Never thought I would see that.
And it's crazy to think like that. I mean, there's so much room for professions in weightlifting. Whether it's I mean, a really good example of that is there's more meets, which means that there's more opportunities for photographers and videographers
That right there.
in
That
weightlifting, right? And so if you have a passion for that and weightlifting, boom, you have a great avenue. Or somebody like Seb from Weightlifting House
yes.
can come up and then put
Love
out
it.
just an absolutely incredible channel growing the sport of weightlifting just by documenting it, and
Yeah.
there's all kinds of things like that. So it's really exciting. That's
Yeah.
really cool.
That's
Uh,
where I'm excited about. I want to see it keep going.
yeah, that's great. Danny, thank you. I appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
Up next, I interview Coach Aaron Pele about how he uses data tracking and tiered level programming with his team. But first, I wanted to let you know that this week's episode is sponsored by my free beginner guide and 6-week program. This program has been used by over 1,500 lifters to learn the Olympic lifts from scratch, even if you've never touched a barbell before. It's got a full breakdown of the proven progressions that I've used over the last few years to teach the snatch, clean, and jerk, all laid out into a 6-week program. You guys can find the free beginner program linked in the description below, but I know a lot of you guys are already experienced lifters, so please share this with somebody who wants to learn the Olympic lifts but doesn't know where to start. All right, back to the episode. I am joined by Coach Aaron Pele. He's the owner of Full Send Ollie, coach of the North Bay Haven weightlifting team, and a national level coach in USA weightlifting with a lifter who recently just competed at Youth Pan Ams for Team USA, and she's also made the Youth World Team as well. Aaron, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, for sure. So we're gonna go ahead and get into this first question that I've got for you. You guys just had a great performance at States for girls weightlifting. What are 3 things that you think made the biggest difference between this year and last year?
That's a great question. I think the biggest 3 things that we've had this year is first off is percentage-based openers. We did
Okay.
this with all of our kids. What we ended up doing is we found percentages throughout programming that we were able to hit. For instance, if it was 87% or 88%, maybe it was 84%. We kept hitting those numbers, and if they continued to make those numbers, we would kind of declare those as the openers. What got really good is throughout the rest of the season, because we have so many meets, we started to find out that our openers and our seconds would help to eventually determine what our later on openers would be. For instance, we had a couple athletes, actually 2 of them that won state, took both percentages at both opener and second attempts were at about 88 to 94% make rates. So that ended up really in our favor for a lot of other things later on. And later actually helped one of our athletes win the meet by deciding what third attempt we were going to take, because she actually had that one, which was kind of crazy. It was a 97% make rate versus the other one that was 66% make rate. So we took that, and she went in with the clean and jerks where she was much better off, and won state actually with her opening clean and jerk.
Let's go.
Yeah.
So throughout the whole season, you guys are not just tracking obviously like percentages, which is pretty common for most weightlifting programs, but you guys are tracking the percentage of attempts at that weight that you've made. Is that something that you're tracking in competition, or is that something that you're tracking in competition and in training?
Both. I would say it's definitely both, and it would have to be both because you wouldn't know maybe on the day of, for instance, in competition. Maybe there's, I've had athletes that just have that blank moment and they go, I don't know what happened during the meet, but they're fine at practice, and we have a moment to talk to it. But yeah, most of those are all, they're all based off of both, and I can say. I'm pretty sure I actually talked with our other assistant coach on this, and this might be wild now that we brought it up. We didn't have a single person bomb out all year at any meet.
That's a big deal.
That was we had 100% like no. Now I know that there'll be probably coaches that go like, well, they didn't maybe push so hard. It's like no, they were still missing like second and third attempts, or
Right.
they were missing. Hey, some of them did miss their openers, but we didn't have a single athlete actually bomb out throughout the whole entire year.
That's impressive, man. I wish I could say the same thing, honestly. So that's pretty cool. That's such a good tool. Is just it's a way to also show the athlete some data, because a lot of the time athletes really want to push harder than what they especially the openers. They always want to go heavy on those openers.
Yep.
And it's a good way to show them like, hey, no, you actually have, you've only made this weight 50% of the time that you've taken it.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we take something that's you've made like 90% of the time? How about that?
Yes. Yes. And
I like that.
if
That's
you
really cool.
and especially working with youth athletes, I think any coach or anybody will understand this. They want to know why, right? Like they want to know. If you tell them, "Hey, let's take 145 instead of 150," well, why?
Yeah.
Like why would you do that? And then you bring up some data, or you bring up maybe like a checklist item list. Sometimes I do have a couple athletes I've done that with. It's a little different, but it's just, they want to know, so it's something helpful.
I
Um,
like that. That's cool.
but yeah,
So
and
so
then
what else do you think has made a big difference this year?
A lot of when we did goal setting this year, we used a lot of complex PRing, really in the front end of the cycle. For instance, we used a lot of low blocks, low hangs, yo-yos, or double pump, whichever you want to call it. Um, Really to help like a lot of our advanced athletes, those positioning drills and stuff like that really help some athletes that struggled maybe navigating the knee, getting the hamstrings a little stronger, just all in all, like staying over the bar longer. Matter of fact, like the yo-yos were fantastic for that as well too. Um, but yeah, I would say a lot of those like PR complex, we would take a lot of them would take like we'd start off maybe at a baseline of about like 84 to 83% of their max, and we'd push that to almost 91, 93%. So they were PRing without like, going past their current progression. But if you're taking your double at 93 and 95%, or even a triple, like you're going, I think 100% is going to be a pretty good day when we actually take this the way we need to.
Yeah, it's a lot more of like a building momentum rather than like testing,
Yeah, I
you know.
100%. And I would treat it, and I will say, because I have to put this input in there because I love the style of this. It's a guardrail, right? Like programming is supposed to be that, and I know a lot of coaches have said that, and it's like kind of gets a little redundant. But programming is a guardrail. It is not the Bible. It is not like set in stone. Things can be changed in it. You can widen the road or you can narrow the road, but that guardrail is supposed to be for you and for the athlete, mainly for
Hmm.
you as the coach to know, okay, am I like killing them with volume? Like and you're watching them miss over and over and over and over and over and over again. Yeah, that part is really key to that for those.
That makes a lot of sense. And then it's also kind of cool for the athlete too, because let's say that you've got a variation for them that's a challenging one and not one that they feel better on. If
Mm,
we so an example of this, like I'm really bad at low hangs. Like low hangs are a frustrating variation for me in particular.
mhm.
Um, but I know that if I push the low hang and I take it from 80% to being able to do 93, 95%, that we can guarantee that I've made some positional changes and I've improved some
Mhm.
technique. I've gotten some more skill with a weak point of mine that we can more than likely assume that my classic lift is going to go up.
Oh yeah, 100%. I think that would also be it's very true of my even my 139 at one state. Anna, she was fantastic. She had that was 100% the low hangs and yo-yos were mainly because she would not be able to stay over the bar longer. So the
Hmm.
yo-yos helped that, and then later on after we did the yo-yos, going into the low hangs, we could actually it was almost like we pushed optimal strength after really getting her hamstrings strong.
Mm.
And it was really cool to watch those two like go from one goal, which was we want to be strong and stay over the bar, to we now just want to be really strong. We know how to stay over the bar and then go right into it. And she, like I said, she went from going to like missing, I'll be honest, missing 140 in the beginning of the season a couple times, coming back from a little bit of an injury to then taking 165 and actually a near miss at 170. So,
Dang.
yeah.
Wow. Okay, that's cool. So we're pushing those variations and complex PRs. What's the last thing here?
The last thing this year is that we did a leveling program for a lot of our kiddos. For instance, a lot of the younger kiddos that we have, and a lot of people, the season goes really fast for everyone. So the level one program we had was actually teaching them top and bottom, and then trying to get them to do the full movement through positions a little quicker. For instance, we did a lot of halts, a lot of pauses, like at mid thigh. And I will tell you, if their coaches listen to that mid thigh is a fantastic and atrocious position all at the same time. As much as you can hammer it, eventually they get it. They're
Hmm.
not going to get it immediately, but I can tell you after doing it for 3 weeks with most of our kids in that level one programming, majority of them will be able to do it. So doing lots of halts for the littles, that's also strengthening too for them. Like
Yeah.
it's not like people would think, oh, it's technique, it's technique. Well, yes, it's technique, but if I told them to halt for like 5 seconds, you just made that a strength movement at
Right.
that
Yeah.
point.
And that's the thing. Like they're so most of the time they're so inexperienced that the difference between technique work and strength work is like 5 pounds a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So if you implement a pause into a position or a tempo into a position, it
Mm-hmm.
really kind of blurs the line between what's technique work and what's strength work. So you kind of get a little bit of bang for your buck on both ends of that.
Exactly. And then we had our level two programming, which was like kind of a mixture of our kiddos that had been in the program but were not beginners. So a lot of that was actually pushing a lot of strength, like a lot of back squatting, a lot of front squatting, higher percentage. They had some of the complexes that I mentioned, but it was more like setting the line of like, hey, if I had like a really heavy back squat week, I'm probably not going to go like really hard on the low hangs and really hard on hangs because that's already really hard on the body as it is. Now, when you're 11 years old, you probably could do whatever you want. I mean, like you could just do the recovery time's crazy for those little ones. But understanding your athlete, knowing, hey, we're going to do this, and the moderate, like I said, the moderate vets that I had, a lot of strength building. I think they did fantastic. One of those girlies in that program actually took her openers for her maxes for her openers at state, and I will say she actually missed her opener at state, and then made her second with an increase from a make that she has made throughout. No, I'm sorry, it wasn't a make. It was. We went 5 pounds under her max. I apologize. She took her max on a second attempt, made it just fine.
Hmm.
It's perfectly fine because the percentage wise to that she hadn't missed it, but maybe once at the back end of the season, and it was I think it was at 86%, 86% make rate. So it was really cool to know that. And then the level three program we had for our higher athletes, our athletes that were pushing actually close to 300, 350 plus totals as a female athlete, and is actually pretty phenomenal. I don't think a lot of people understand how heavy that really is, but you are talking about a young female putting up probably a 200-pound clean and jerk and a 150 snatch. Those are great numbers regardless of where you are. They got a lot of those variations I mentioned earlier with going through the low blocks and going through like my 199. She sometimes has a little bit of the issue going around the knees and stuff, but for the low block, and she'll kick the weight out. So the low blocks do help her kind of navigate where she needs to go. So we worked on that more versus the other athletes that maybe had more of the low hangs and the other ones that had yo-yos.
So you basically had like three separate programs running. Like for the beginners, they're doing a lot of position work, learning from the hip, and then learning a lot of like. I do the same thing in my beginner program where
Mm-hmm.
we're pausing multiple times throughout the pull, and just doing a lot of technique work there, and then maybe a little bit of strength focus. And then
Mm-hmm.
as you maybe in your second year on the team or third year on the team, and you're not a beginner anymore, where a lot of your issues tend to be more strength limited, right? Like you're
Mm-hmm.
pushing your back squat, pushing the pulls, 3 rep maxes, 2 rep maxes, that kind of stuff. And then probably the last like 1 or 2 years on the team, like juniors and seniors, maybe, especially if they're a little bit more advanced.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like you're kind of just doing more individual programming for the person. So they all might be on like a template approach, but then the variations that you're choosing are specific to the athlete.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's when the coaching happens a little bit
Yeah.
too, right? Like that, I think anybody can program, anybody can open a book and copy it, but when you're able to look at that program and go, what do I need to change for an
Mhm.
athlete? Congratulations, you started coaching your programming. So,
Yeah, that's cool. All right, so let's go and move into question number two here. So with boys weightlifting season kind of ramping up right now, what are 3 things that you recommend athletes focus on to get the most out of the season?
let's start with the first one with going into let's find a USAW coach. I
Yeah.
would say that's kind of I would say that would be number one. Now, if your high school coach is a USAW coach, that does not give you the means to go find another USAW coach.
Right.
That's
Right.
not what
Yeah.
I'm saying. But I would recommend, or even your high school coach, maybe like talking with that USAW coach. I actually have that experience. I coach at a high school. I'm a USAW coach and I help other coaches that are actually in the exact same division.
Hmm.
And it's really cool because as coach to coach, we can then understand an athlete better, and that would help you as an athlete, right? Like if you got more eyes on you that want to understand, I think it's better than having no eyes on you and no one understanding. So, that's my first recommendation. Because that'll, technique work, that would be a lot of play. And a lot of times I think even working with the other program that I did, it wasn't like I wasn't modifying anything anybody was doing. I was just changing some technique work. Matter of fact, our kiddos that would have that practice at their school, they come up on Saturdays for a club. I would just program what was needed for them on
Hmm.
Saturday. They didn't
Yeah.
have any program Saturday, so matter of fact, some of them got the halts that I was just talking about. Some of them got the block work as well, because that was something they just needed. Saturday was a really good technique day, and I will say that that's really fun to do versus maybe it being a Big Send Saturday or something like that. It turned into more of a, hey, this is a nice Saturday. We're working on things, and it's a good segue in the next week.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's and the important thing here to remember is I think that I maybe made this mistake as a coach was when I was trying to get people who were doing high school weightlifting to work with me as a USA weightlifting coach. I would also try and like take over their programming for them, and I think that's honestly just a mistake. It's really hard. It's too much to try and balance programming from a USAW coach and from the high school. The USAW coach, the biggest thing that they can help you with is just your technique,
Mm-hmm.
right? So anybody who's listening to this, if you're in high school weightlifting, like the biggest thing they're going to help you with is technique and the snatch and the clean and jerk. And they just understand the movement to a depth that most high school weightlifting coaches, especially the ones who are just kind of doing it for the stipend, just don't understand and don't have that grasp yet. So that's such a great recommendation. What else do you have here? What are the other 2?
All right. I think it would probably be warming up. Warming up. So this is just also coming from the girls' season too, and so my girlies can probably go, "Oh yeah, coach is talking about me." Um, take a moment and realize that the meet maybe starts in an hour, right? Like It does not take an hour for you to warm up. I know I saw it even at States for the girls, and I've seen it in the guys before. It was 1:56, and there's people warming up already on the platform. The meet started at 3 o'clock now, mind you, 3 o'clock. It is one of those like, hey, somebody put an all call out an APV for some coaches. I don't know what's going on back here, but like, it just, and if you know you're the last lifter, and even if it's your local meet, because you got so many meets going on throughout the year, it shouldn't take you more than maybe 7 to 8 attempts on a snatch to warm up.
Hmm.
And that's pushing it there. Like I would say 6 to 7's fine, but like 7 to 8 tops. My babies only take maybe 5 warm-ups for
Right.
snatch when they're
Yeah.
so little. If you gotta, if for some reason you have to have 100 hours to warm up, you must be 75 years old at that
Well,
point.
and I don't even know that that's what the issue is. Like warm ups was something that I talked about all season with the kids because
Hmm.
it's really easy once you get into, especially if you're in like a small gym and you've got a whole other 25-person team that's there. It's
Yeah.
really easy to just get swept up in it and feel like you got to start warming up now, otherwise you're going to miss out. But I really had to talk to, especially the girls that were a little bit more advanced, and just remind them that like you guys are not going to be taking a lift for, there's 35 attempts before you go. And so anybody who's listening, if you're in high school weightlifting, go look at the sheet or go look at the board and figure out how long you've got until you go. If you're opening at 100 and let's say you're opening at 185, but there is
Hmm.
6 other lifters that have to open between 95 and 135,
Hmm.
you know that every single one of those people is going to have to take an attempt before you go. So it
Exactly.
makes no sense to warm up at the same time as them. Most of the time, if you're the last lifter, you probably don't need to start warming up until the meet starts.
Hmm.
And that's super important. Like, I mean, just like at regionals, when we were there, I saw people warming up their bench press while snatch is going. I'm like, I would stop and just be like, hey, just so you know, we're not gonna bench for like 3 more hours.
You're,
You're not getting warmed up. And then the other thing that is kind of
yeah.
frustrating about that is like if you do end up warming up, you don't want to
Hmm.
have to re-warm back up. So a lot of the time these guys are just doing their warm-ups and then they're going out and waiting for 30 minutes and they wonder why
Hmm.
they missed their opener all the time or why it felt so hard. And that,
Yes.
especially like even if you think about just little things that can make you better, right?
Hmm.
If you go out and you wait 30 minutes before your opener, say you're lucky and you pull it off, but it feels
Hmm.
really hard. Because of how it felt, your brain's like, I should make a 5 pound jump instead of a 10 pound jump. But that's going
Yep.
to pull back your total potentially up to about 20 pounds from what you maybe could have hit if you're just
Hmm.
warmed up properly and like timed it at the right time. So I think that's such an important one. Don't warm
And
up lifts that aren't happening right now, and make sure to
yes.
warm up at the time that you like, so that you have about 3 to 5 minutes from your last warm up lift to
Yep.
your first on the platform lift.
Yeah, and like I said, it's that simple. And for those that probably don't know how to count attempts, just to add this in a little bit, and you made a good reference to it, like, between 85 and 105, and you're open up with 185, right? If you took just 10 pounds, right, and you said, all right, that person's going to go 85 pounds, all right, add 10 more pounds. They're probably going to jump up 10 more pounds. It's pretty normal in high school. 95 pounds, 10 more pounds, 105 pounds, right? That means you have a total of 3 attempts right there. And that
Just
kid
from
could
that
be
one person.
and they could be following themselves. They're gonna get 2 minutes for each one of those now, right? So,
Right.
and my kids, which was really cool, you brought up and bringing up the attempt count side to this. My kids knew how to do that. My kids
Yeah.
would go up to the board and they go, "Coach, I'm like 48 attempts out." I was like, "Good, don't warm up."
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I'm still working on getting my kids good at that. Right now, it's a lot of me running around and doing it for them, but that'll be a change that we make next season, I think. Okay, so that's a good one. And what's the last one that you've got here? Going 6 for 6 or 9 for 9 early in the season.
Oh, yes, God blessed, yes. That goes back to the percentage makes that we were talking about earlier, even with my girls program. It is so much better for you to start off the season 6 for 6, 9 for 9, whatever you want to call it. Than it is to just go like, I'm gonna go out and try my personal best on this first meet. And it's your first meet. Like, just be in mind that like in any situation of competition, you got jitters going on. There's gonna be mistakes that happen. Maybe a judge sees something that didn't actually happen. You know, we love hearing that all the time. But just trying to go 6 for 6 is fine. Matter of fact, I think that worked out better. Like talking to you about it a little bit. Just like, you know, a while back here and there between like openers, right? If you're opening 40 and then making 50 all the time, right? Say you do that for 3 meets. You know, I was like, I made 40, I made 50, I made 40, I made 50, I made 40, I made 50. Man, it sounds like you can open with 50, right? Like
Or at
you
least
just
45.
at least 45, right? Matter of fact, 100%. That is exactly what I did with the 199 we had. We opened with 190, and she made 200. And I kid you not, that kid did not miss it one time throughout the whole season. Not 190 and not 200. She did not miss it at all. And we took the split of that as the win. We
Mm-hmm.
said we're gonna do 195, and she buries it. And I'm like, look at that. That isn't that wonderful. Like she had the confidence to know, like, I could do 200. I don't need 200.
Right.
I could do 190. I don't really want 190. I need 195. Let's meet this right here. Let's end this. And that actually forced, like, I think it forced all three girls of her competition. They had to take 220 plus in order to beat her.
Mm-hmm.
And well, good luck. I mean, like, you know, I'm gonna make you
Yeah.
all PR today at that point.
Yeah.
But for the boys' side, because it can get a little hectic, and I get it, and we all want to push PRs, man. Like, we love PRs. Who doesn't love a good PR? But being more confident throughout the entire season, that will get your PRs. You'll know how everything feels. You'll
Mm-hmm.
know what, you know, even in competition, you know how, that's what's great about high school side. You get to know how your opener would feel good and bad probably within 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Versus USAW, you might not know what that opener feels like for like maybe what, a month, 2 months, maybe, you know,
Right.
depending on how your coach programs. So,
Yeah, that's such an important point for the season because high school weightlifting is somehow both a really short season and a really long season at the same time. And when you're pushing your attempts early in the season where you're trying PRs like every single week, yeah, I can guarantee you you're going to be burnt out before the season ends. Like where the season really matters most at districts, regionals and states. Like those are the 3 meets that matter the most. Like everything leading up to that is just practice is how I think about it. And so
exactly.
if you're pushing your attempts so much where you're missing your openers or you're missing your second attempts all the time early in the season, you're not really building that much momentum or confidence going through the later season, but you're also setting yourself up where you're probably going to start hurting pretty good by the time the season ends when it matters most, you know. So I think it's such a good point. It's like let's see how many meets in a row we can make all 3 attempts or how many meets in a row can we do the same openers. Let's say you do 3 meets in a row where you make all the same all 3 attempts, bump those openers up 5 pounds and see if you can do it
Mm-hmm.
for another 3 meets in a row, and that's just going to give you a ton of confidence going into that postseason and really helping like win some actual medals.
I mean, like, and just like that, again, the confidence side, I've seen this happen too at meets where there's competition, right? You finally have somebody that's competition. Saw this actually at state too. And we were so good at percentage makes. Our openers look like we could have burned another 20, 30 pounds on them. Where some athletes missed openers because of nerves. They
Right.
were scared. They're petrified. Like, I haven't had this competition before. Where you're not even focused on your competition at that point. It's like, I know what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed
Yeah.
to. So, you know, like take that with a grain of salt. Whoever wants to listen to that, but you will find that will put you in such a better mode to weight lift than you focusing on anybody else and just ignore all the other stuff going on. You will find so much more confidence in that than you will be looking over at somebody else's snatch opening with whatever, because guess what, they could bomb out.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, that's awesome, man. Thank you. That's great stuff. I appreciate it.
no problem, man. I appreciate you. Let me chat it up with you.
Up next, I interview Coach Sean Coltis about how he took his team to the state championships and won gold. But first, I want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by my OlyStrong team program. The OlyStrong team is my flagship coaching program. You'll get 3 to 5 days a week of weightlifting programming, daily video feedback, and unlimited coach messaging for $19 to $29 a month. Click the link in the description below to start your free week trial today. All right, back to the episode.
Sean Coltis is the coach of Fleming Island Girls Weightlifting, who just recently won the state championships for the FHSAA Olympic division. Now, Coach, I know you're fairly new to coaching weightlifting, starting 4 years ago. Is that correct?
That's correct, Brian.
Okay.
40
So 4 years ago. Okay.
Yes,
So
sir.
what are the what are the three biggest changes that you've made that have led to you guys having this state championship title, despite 4 years ago having no girls go to states?
Sure. You know what? I think I was a head football coach twice. So I think it's so important. Like there's certain universal things about just coaching in general. So,
Mhm.
I think just, obviously effort goes a long way, consistency, relationships. So all those things that regardless if you're coaching football or weightlifting, bottom line was, we weren't that good of a team. We didn't win a meet 4 years ago. So I kind of knew it was going to take a while. So it was just about, getting freshmen out for the team, making sure they enjoyed it. It's one thing, a lot of coaches can get kids out, but that
Mhm.
retention is important too. You can get them out,
Oh,
but what are you going to do to make sure they don't quit? So, making sure that, build a relationship with them, that it was fun. Now we're going to work our butt off, but just, it was a long process we had to do, and I knew it would take some time. So really focused on getting those freshmen out, but more importantly, keeping them out. And, obviously freshman year, you're trying to get them, two things: fall in love with the sport and teach them technique. And obviously once you get those two things established, then you can kind of, you know, sophomore through senior year get stronger and obviously peak those lifts. So it's been a
absolutely.
process, but it's something that, like I said, being a head football coach, I really thought about like the same recipe that I use for football, even though it's weightlifting, it's the things like, parent communication and, being a good planner and organizer, great with relationships and all those things are still going to hold true no matter what sport you're doing. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that's such a good point on keeping girls in the sport. Like that is, I mean, that's really all it takes. Like if you want to have good, especially a great high school team, and you want to win a state championships, that's mostly going to happen with juniors and seniors. At least on the backs of their performances, you may have some standouts here and there at younger age, but the only reason those juniors and seniors are good is because they had a strong foundation as a freshman and a sophomore. And
All five of our, people that went on the podium and got us points, all five of our girls were juniors and seniors.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you're like you said, every once in a while you're going to luck out and have a kid that maybe lifted before high school. But what's so unique about weightlifting, I really hadn't given it much thought until recently, was most sports, for the most part, kids have played softball and basketball and football and things like volleyball since they're a little kid.
Mhm.
For the most part, weightlifting, a lot of kids come to high school don't even know it's a sport.
Yeah.
So those kids you're getting as freshmen, that's their first year ever. So those kids can be real intimidated coming in there as a freshman, seeing what a senior's doing. They don't even know what a snatch or a clean jerk is, and they come in there. So how are you going to make it where a kid that's never done that sport before, first of all, is going to come out, but not only that, but they're going to stay out and not be intimidated by those seniors that are lifting a lot of weight and things like that. But with that being said, it's kind of cool because it's that challenge, and you do have a clean slate. You're not trying to undo, other coaches, teaching. They're only going to know the technique that you've taught them. So it's really interesting that way, and I love it.
So, with technique being such a big focus, what are the things that you guys are doing to drill that with your girls? Because watching your girls compete at regionals and states, they had some of the best technique out there. I was really impressed. So what are you guys focused on the most?
You know what? I would just say, like, you got to crawl before you walk and walk before you run. And just, don't be in too much of a hurry. I think it's so important. Like, when they come in as freshmen, first of all, something I do that I will keep doing is I really isolate the freshmen coming into the summer. As far as I don't want them to be intimidated, I kind of get them by themselves and really focus on that technique.
Mm.
And I don't want them to be intimidated by the older girls. So just really, you know, being smart and cognizant of like the mobility piece. I think that's step one. Obviously a great weightlifter is going to have mobility, technique, and be strong. So, we really just start them off with, I should not be teaching a kid a snatch if they can't do an overhead squat with a PVC pipe. I
Yeah,
mean, we have
yeah,
kids that are squatting, they haven't bought weightlifting shoes yet, but they don't have the ankle mobility. So we got them, they're working on squatting with, 10-pound plates under their heels and just things that way they can actually feel, what is a correct squat with their chest up and, you know, and we put those 10-pound plates under their heels and we don't have them squatting anything other than their body or maybe a PVC pipe on their back. So just really, not trying to do too much too soon, having them enjoy it. You know, and obviously at that point you can kind of see some kids come in and they have excellent mobility and they pick up on things faster than others. So you can kind of give them more than, you know, some of the others. But some kids really, I mean, there's no reason to, if a kid can't do an overhead squat and, you know, get in that perfect position on the PVC pipe, why in the world do you have them do with the bar? You know, we
Yeah,
have
absolutely.
bar, you know, like I said, we have PVC pipes and training bars, and I kind of give them that go ahead of like, look, before you put weight on that bar, you better be able to do it perfectly with just that empty bar.
Mm-hmm.
So having kids, you know, going at their different level, progressing, you know, as they go, and just like I said, just having them technique first, a lot of mobility, you know, and then at that point, you know, once they kind of get it, then we can start kind of, you know, trying to PR and increase strength and things like that. So just like I said, just a lot of technique. I know I can't remember the exact name of the lifter, but I know there was a U.S. like Olympic weightlifter that was a powerlifting background first. And I want to say maybe he won gold, but he was one of the best USA Olympic heavyweight weightlifters of all time. And he had
Shane
a power
Hammond.
background. Shane Hammond, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
You're right. Shane Hammond. And I remember hearing a podcast one time that I think used an empty bar for the first month of his training.
Yeah.
So yeah, Shane Hammond, a dude that probably, you know, he had the leg strength, I'm sure, from squatting and deadlifting and things like that. But, you know, for the first month that he lifted, used an empty bar. So
And
why
that's a guy.
I mean, high school girl use anything more than that for that first month? So we have, like I said, training bars and, you know, women's bars and things like that where they can use some lightweight and PVC pipes and things like that. And, you know, not only that, but like things like tempo lifts, tempo snatch, or what, you know, some people call it a slow clean or a slow snatch, but just things where it's like, all right, guys, we're gonna go real slow, you know, maybe 3 to 5 seconds in the middle of your thigh, and then we're gonna speed it up and jump. And then when you do catch the, you know, snatch, we're gonna, you know, hold that position and make sure the bar is over the middle of our foot and our feet are flat. That way we can feel that balance. You know, if you're doing a, you know, a jerk or something, like we're gonna teach the kids no bar at all. Just put your hands on your hips and learn that, you know, split jerk footwork first, just with our hands on our hips, and, you know, just being a good teacher. You know, if a kid can't do a strict military press and feel the proper bar path, why are you teaching them a jerk? So I think just being smart about, all right, strict military press first, they can feel just the bar path. All right, now let's teach push press. You know, how they're feeling, all right, the dip and drive and incorporating the legs. Now let's teach them the split jerk footwork. And then maybe once they get that, then we can teach them the split jerk. So just being a great teacher, and again, just empty bar and just a million reps, and, you know, hold positions, hit that split jerk and hold it for 3 seconds, and I can come by and check them, and even themselves, they're checking it. I want them to have a checklist of like, look, is my weight 50% on each foot? Is there a straight line between my hip and shoulder and bar? You know, is my, you know, back heel elevated off the ground? You know, all those little things. Because a freshman kid, their back foot's going to be flat. It's going to be turned out sideways. Their back leg's going to be straight. They're going to be all off balance. So they're literally going through that checklist in their head and holding positions over and over and over. And just, you know, I want them eventually to feel if the lift's wrong themselves. Now, I'm still going to correct, but the best weightlifters ever can feel when it lifts off, and they're aware of their body and knowing when something's wrong. So really just technique first, and a lot of mobility, and strength, and everything will come. So, and even on squats, we just rep, you know, sets of 10, you know, just with a bar, you know, back squat, front squat, and things like that. And some kids, you know, they can't do it correctly. So we put the plates under their heels. The kids that are, you know, their chest is dropping, and we tell them, like, you know, obviously weightlifting shoes will help you eventually, but until you buy some weightlifting shoes, let's elevate those heels. It'll help you get that ankle mobility and feel what a proper squat, you know, feels like. And maybe some kids are only going down, you know, part way. All right, you're starting to go down and your chest is dropping, you know, so maybe you only go down halfway, but the second that chest drops, let's stop. That way, you know, but explain to them why. I'll literally show them, like, this is a proper snatch and this is a proper clean. And look what happens when my chest drops. That bar is going to be, you know, going forward. I'm going to lose it. So, you know, making sure they understand the why. But again, most importantly, just like I said, technique, mobility, fall in love with the sport, and try to keep those kids out.
I love that. That's awesome. And it sounds like you guys have a really great program over there. So, you know, keep up the great work, man. I appreciate you coming on.
If you liked this episode, then make sure to check out this video where I break down the 7 lifts you need to get strong for Olympic weightlifting and give you my strength standards to snatch, clean, and jerk 100, 200, and 300 pounds. Or you can check out our recent episode of the Last Set Best Set podcast with Coach Calvin, where we dive deep on how to build upper body strength for weightlifting. We'll catch you guys next week.